joining me again for a story from Magical Tales from Many Lands, one of my favorite books, a collection of stories from different cultures around the world. Our story today comes from the Caribbean, and it is called The King Who Wanted to Touch the Moon. Long ago, there lived a king who always had to have his own way. Everyone had to do exactly what he said, immediately. No talk, no arguing. Well, one night this king looked out the window and saw the silvery moon riding high in the sky. And then and there he wanted to reach out and touch it. But even he couldn't do that. So he thought about it and thought about it. Night and day he thought about it. At last he worked out a way that he could touch the moon. He would have a tall, tall tower built that reached to the sky, and then he would climb to the top and touch the moon. So he ordered the royal carpenter to build the tower. The carpenter shook his head. A tower so tall that it reaches right to the moon, Your Majesty? It is not possible. It can't be done. Can't? Shouted the king. There's no such word as can't in this kingdom. Come back tomorrow morning first thing and tell me exactly how you are going to build my tower. The carpenter did some hard thinking, and in the end he worked out a way to build a tall tower. The next morning he went to the king and said, Your Majesty, the way to build the tower is to pile up lots of strong wooden chests, one on top of the other, hundreds and thousands of them, until they reach the sky. Now, the king liked this idea. So he ordered his subjects to search their homes and bring all their strong chests to the palace, immediately. And if anyone refused, well, there was plenty of room in the royal prisons. So, of course, the people brought their chests to the king, and there were all kinds of chests, big and small, carved and polished, painted and plain. Then the carpenter and his assistants set to work. They laid chest upon chest, one on top of the other, up and up, and before long a tall tower stood outside the palace. But when all the chests had been used, the tower did not even reach to the clouds. So the king said to the carpenter, Make more chests. Wood was found, and the carpenter and his assistants sawed and hammered and made more chests. They laid them one on top of the other, up and up. But when all the chests had been used, the tower reached only to the clouds. Make more chests, said the king to the carpenter. We have no more wood, Your Majesty, the carpenter replied. Then cut down all the trees and get more wood, ordered the king. The carpenter shook his head. All the trees, he said. Oh no, we can't do that. Did I hear you say can't? Have you forgotten there is no word as can't in this kingdom? Demanded the king. Go and cut down all the trees. Immediately. So all the trees in the kingdom were chopped down. The great ancient trees and the slender saplings, the fruit trees and the nut trees and the flowering trees, all were cut down and sawed into planks and made into chests, more and more chests. And the chests were laid one on top of the other, up and up. When all the chests had been used, the tower reached beyond the clouds and into the sky. The king gazed up at the tower and was pleased. The time has come for me to climb my tall, tall tower and touch the moon, he announced. Then he began to climb, up and up, until at last he stood at the top of his tall, tall tower. He looked up and he stretched out both of his arms, but he could not quite reach the moon. He stood on the tips of his toes and stretched some more. He was very close. He could almost touch the moon, but not quite. The king shouted down, Bring up another chest, just one. One will be enough. The carpenter looked around. There were no more chests and no more wood, and not a single tree in all the land. So he called out, Your Majesty, there are no more chests. The king shouted back, Then take one from the bottom and bring it up here. The carpenter was astonished. He couldn't take a chest out from the bottom of the pile. Well, could he? Surely the king was not serious. But the king was shouting again, Didn't you hear me? Take one out from the bottom, immediately. The carpenter raised his eyebrows, shrugged his shoulders, and did as he was told. He pulled a chest out from the bottom of the pile. And you can imagine what happened next. The whole tall tower came tumbling down, king chests and more chests, one on top of the other. So that was the end of the king who always had to have it his own way and wanted, above anything else, to touch the moon. And that is the end of our story from the Caribbean today. Thank you for joining me.